this countdown, we have The Sorrows of Young Werther. This book has been famously associated with something referred to as the Werther effect because of the negative impact it had on readers. So this book came out in 1774 and it inspired a huge wave of people taking their lives. It was a terrible epidemic. That's how strong the influence had on its readers. So young men started to copy the main character in the book. They would dress the same as he was portrayed in the book, and then later would take their own lives the way that he did in the book. This caused the book to be banned in countries such as Denmark and Italy. It was so bad that people believed this book was cursed, and every young man that read it will soon be tempted to take their own life, even if they were in the right mindset.
In our number 9 spot today, we have The Orphan's Story. This book was originally written in the early 1600s, but it didn't end up getting published until 2018. The Orphan's Story is about a 14-year-old Spanish boy who heads to the Americas. You know, a classic coming-of-age feel-good story, right? Well, not exactly, and that is the reason it took so long for it to be published. While the curse in this book doesn't come from the story itself, there is something dark lurking in those pages. The book's publisher, Belinda Palacios, who worked on the book for 2 years, explained that throughout those years, she was often warned of the cursed book and how every publisher who had tried to work on it before ended up passing away in a mysterious way before they were able to finish the book. When Belinda looked into this, it turned out to be true. Her research showed that those who tried to edit the book before either found themselves in horrible accidents or with strange illnesses. Luckily, Belinda made it through the process unscathed, so let's hope that maybe the curse has been lifted. Either way, it's probably one I'll personally stay away from.
Moving on at number 8, we have The Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a cursed grimoire that is said to contain summoning spells for over 72 demons, and no one knows who wrote it. What we do know though is that this book contains a bunch of compiled texts from the 17th century. Some of these texts tell the reader how to conjure and control spirits or demons. This book is apparently so cursed that anyone who keeps a copy of it will die or experience constant bad luck. One person who owned a copy of the book reported the book's pages turning on its own. Another time, the book violently flew across the room and towards them. Although we don't know who wrote the book, legend has it that King Solomon originally wrote it for his son. He then asked him to be buried with it. But apparently, when he was getting prepared for burial, a group of Babylonian philosophers found the book, and one of them got a vision from an angel. The angel told him to hide the book from the unworthy, so he decided to cast a spell on it to keep it from getting into the wrong hands. And that's how the book got cursed.
In our number 7 spot today, we have the Untitled Grimoires. A witch's spellbook should never be messed with. I feel like that should be obvious, but I'll put that out there because apparently it isn't. The Untitled Grimoires are a set of handwritten spellbooks that were sold online for $14,000 in 2013. The books were written in the 1960s by a high priestess of Wicca who was the leader of a coven, and they detail things like spells, incantations, enchantments, and instructions on summoning spirits and demons. So, witch stuff. This is all fine and well unless you're sitting there thinking about how you don't believe. If you are a non-believer, it is best to stay as far away as possible from these books. The seller of the books warned that any non-believers who mess with the book will bring upon themselves a deadly curse, and on the first page of the book, the Wiccan herself wrote that proceeding with the book may have serious consequences. It reads, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hands of the craft." I think we can all appreciate the heads up she gave us on this one. Again, this is just another one I'll probably stay far away from, and not just because I don't have $14,000 to spend on a pair of books.
Coming in at number 6, we have The Catcher in the Rye. This book has been linked to a number of murders. It's believed that the book might have inspired these killings. First, we have John Lennon. When John Lennon was shot by Mark David Chapman, apparently he calmly sat down on the curb and started flipping through The Catcher in the Rye as he waited for the police. In fact, inside the book, it was later discovered he wrote, and I quote, "To Holden Caulfield, from Holden Caulfield. This is my statement." And he signed it Holden's name, who is the main character in the book. Furthermore, when police arrested him, he said, and I quote, "I'm sure the big part of me is Holden. The small part of me must be the devil." And during his trial, he even read from the book when it was his turn to address the court. But he's not the only one that's been influenced by this book. After John Hinckley Jr.'s assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, it was discovered he too was a fan of the book, and a copy was even found on the table in his hotel room. And lastly, let's talk about Robert John Bardo. He took the life of Rebecca Schaeffer. Well, he had the book in his back pocket while he did the deed. The list goes on and on. There are a dozen more people that apparently got inspired by this book and went on to harm or take someone's life. So some people believe that this book is in fact cursed and will drive the sane insane.
In our number 5 spot today, we have the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. When you're a practitioner of magic, you probably don't give the same sort of gifts that non-magic folk do. So it is no surprise that Abramelin gifted his son a book of spells and curses. In the early 1900s, this book was translated into English, and ever since then, there have been rumors swirling that the book is cursed, which makes a ton of sense considering, like I mentioned, it is a book of curses. Rumor has it that the cursed nature of this book in part has to do with Abramelin's belief that everyone has their own personal demon. The book holds instructions on how to get your demons under control through rituals and supernatural situations, and it is always risky to reach out to the spirit world, so maybe that's why everyone is feeling like this book is cursed. It's looking like unless you absolutely know what you're doing, the contents of this book just might be too powerful. Those who have had bad experiences with the book explain either bad luck or hauntings from the spirit world or what await for those who dare to read it.
Coming in at number 4, we have the Devil's Bible. The Devil's Bible, otherwise known as the Codex Gigas, is this massive 310-page book said to harness evil and negative energy. It was discovered in 1648 and is 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, 8.7 inches thick, and weighs 165 pounds. So now there's this really creepy legend surrounding it. Legend goes that the book was written by a monk, but this monk broke his spiritual vows and his punishment was to be sealed behind a brick wall and left to die. The night before his death, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish this book. So he summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete it for him. In return, he offered him his soul. So legend goes that this book was finished by the devil himself. To make things creepier, this book is filled with drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. On one page, there's a 19-inch frightening drawing of Satan. And apparently the book also contains a bunch of dark rituals and facts like how to perform exorcisms. To top it all off, apparently at some point the book contained 320 pages, not just 310. Those 10 pages were ripped out because they instructed people on how to summon the devil. And thank gosh for that.
In our number 3 spot today, we have the Book of Soiga. This one is often referred to as the Book of Death, and that alone is enough to deter me. If you happen to be braver than I, unfortunately it is unlikely that you'll be able to actually read parts of this book because nobody knows what language it is written in. While the first part of the book details different spells and incantations, the ending part is the most mysterious and where the secrets lie. All the letters in the final part are written in separate boxes, and despite people trying their absolute best, it is extremely difficult to decipher. An Elizabethan scholar named John Dee attempted to decode the book, and he apparently called on an angel named Uriel for help. The angel explained to him that only the Archangel Michael is able to interpret the text. Apparently after John Dee passed away, this book mysteriously vanished, seemingly into thin air. This was in 1608, and for years and years no one could find it until it magically reappeared again in the 19th century. I don't know about you guys, but to me that sounds like some real magic. The catch with this one, however, is that it is said that whoever deciphers the meaning of the code will inevitably die 2.5 years later. So I guess this is like the Ring of books?
In our second spot, we have the Prophecies of Nostradamus. We've talked about this dude a bunch on this channel. Basically, he's a really famous seer and prophet. He's most famous for his book Les Prophéties, which contains hundreds of predictions for future events. And what's scary is that a bunch of these predictions have come true, such as JFK's assassination, the creation of the atomic bomb, rain, and the Great Fire of London, so on and so on. So he's got some credibility. But here's the thing. Are these actually predictions, or are they a list of curses Nostradamus set out for us? A number of people think that it's the second option, and that he literally has cursed us all. He has made these things happen even from beyond the grave. In fact, he managed to curse his grave, so what says he doesn't have the power to curse a book too? Like literally he warned everyone, Whoever opens my tomb will be cursed. And guess what? Legend goes that one day during a war, a couple of soldiers accidentally dug up his grave. When they did, they found him with a plaque that said 1793 on it. That was the year they opened the grave. So he predicted when his grave would be disturbed. Not only that, one of the soldiers picked up his skull and immediately was shot dead by a sniper. So yeah, the soldiers were cursed by him, and now we're all cursed by him and this book.
In our number 1 spot today we have the Grand Grimoire. This book is often referred to as the book with incredible power and has been called one of the darkest books in the world. While the author of this book is still unknown, the contents of it are things like black magic and dark, spooky secrets. It is believed that the book was written sometime around 1521 and it is split into 2 books. Book 1 details instructions on how to summon a demon and how to get the demon to do your bidding. The second book is split into 2 parts and it details how to make a pact with a demon and how to command the spirit, but with less tools, which means it is significantly riskier than the instructions in the first book. Apparently in the book it even details how someone can call upon Lucifer or the devil. The book describes a few different demons and it also gives spells that one can do for things like winning the lottery, love spells, becoming invisible. You know, while those spells certainly sound nice, magic like that always comes at a cost. People fear the Grand Grimoire because they worry that if anyone reads it fully, then the devil will enslave their soul.
At number 10 we have It. Yeah, we all know what this is about and you've seen the movies. But if you weren't spooked by the movies, then you should definitely read the book because it's way scarier. One of my buddies told me a story about how his dad was reading the book and getting so scared while he was reading the book that his mom made him stop reading it because he kept waking her up from night terrors. There are some points in the book that are so much more horrible. Like the bully in the book, Henry Bowers, is way worse in the book than he is in the movies. He is almost as evil as Pennywise himself. At one point he pins down Ben Hanscom and he carves his name into his stomach like he's carving a turkey. He also whitewashes the kid's face in snow until he starts bleeding everywhere, and he also hunts down a dog and kills it. This is all before he gets sent to jail and then escapes from jail and is even more dangerous than before. That alone is enough to make the book much more terrifying, and there's also a weird group sex scene who everyone who reads the book talks about because it's super strange. At number 9 we have the Necronomicon. This isn't just a book, but it's also a weapon. Whoa, super crazy, dude. It's a bunch of texts that have the power to summon demonic forces. It is the backbone of the horror series Evil Dead. The book summons a force that has the ability to kill and infect people with some sort of plague that turns them into slaves of the book while simultaneously rotting their bodies and making them look like bloodthirsty zombies. You can also use this book to summon demons to do your bidding, possess people, and communicate with the dead, and a whole bunch of other demonic things. Also, you read this book at your own risk. All the text is in an unknown language, and if you say the wrong thing, it might bring the end of the world. At number 8 we have the Journal of Tom Riddle. If you're a Harry Potter fan, then you know this book very well. This journal is one of the Horcruxes that is connected to Lord Voldemort. If you write in the book will write back to you, slowly corrupting you, getting into your mind and controlling you. In Harry Potter in the Chamber of Secrets, it corrupts the mind of Ginny Weasley and gets her to open the Chamber of Secrets, which wakes up the basilisk and leaves her for dead inside the chamber. I can't think of a way a book could scar you more than taking over your mind and turning you into a mindless slave. You need to get a lot of therapy to get over that one, yeah. At number 7 we have Pet Sematary. It should be no surprise that there is more than one Stephen King book on this list. He's one of the greatest horror writers that has ever walked the earth. We gotta give him a lot of love. Pet Sematary is one of the great horror classics. You have a cat that dies and then gets buried in a supernatural cemetery. The cat comes back to life. Holy crap, that is amazing. But then the protagonist's daughter dies. They have a funeral for the poor girl, but he can't live with it. He refuses to have his daughter taken away from him. So he goes to the graveyard, digs up his daughter, and then buries her in the supernatural cemetery where it will bring her back to life. And it does. But now the sacred bond between life and death has been broken. I don't want to give away what happens next because it's a great book and you should definitely give it a read. At number 6 we have The Terror, the Dan Simmons novel that proves no matter how bad things get, they can always get worse. The book is a fictional telling of a real life expedition. It was the expedition to find the Northwest Passage back in 1845. 2 massive ships set sail with a crew of 120 people. It was the HMS Ibris and the HMS Terror. In reality, the two ships set out on their expedition and were never seen again. To this day, it is unknown exactly what happened to them, but this book gives an extremely grim idea of what could have gone down. It has everything from being stuck in the frozen tundra of the Arctic in temperatures that would freeze your limbs off, stuck in that temperature for months, to supernatural creatures walking around and stalking them and tormenting them. There's people going insane, poisoning, and even the flashbacks, which are probably the happiest part of the book, are also depressing. If you want a compelling story that will leave you sad in your soul, then you have to pick this one up. It's a very good book. You should read it. At number 5, we have the Untitled Grimoires. This is one of the most mysterious books that has ever worked its way into the public eye. They were written by an unknown witch and scripted in a language that apparently only those who practice witchcraft can read. In fact, it said that you shouldn't even read it if you aren't someone who practices the dark arts, or it will bring death to you and everyone around you. Sounds pretty intense. Rumor says that the scriptures have been worked on through generations, with each time getting passed down they become more powerful. I don't know if I believe the whole hoopla, but someone out there clearly does, because when they were posted online for sale, they sold for over $13,000. I mean, that would be a lot of money to make off of some hoopla, that's for sure. At number 4, we have Silence of the Lambs. Hello, Clarice. You know that thing he does? A book about a super smart serial killer psychologist who is able to break out of prison, manipulate people, and also has a palate that loves the taste of human flesh. Wow, one extremely horrible serial killer packed into a book. Well, let's amp it up even more by throwing in another serial killer that likes to find women, put them in a hole in the ground for weeks at a time, make them put lotion on their skin to soften it up, and then kills them, skins them, and turns their moisturized skin into a nice suit. I think it's a dress, actually, I'm not too sure. Yeah, after reading this book, you'll be walking through your home, making sure all the doors and windows are locked, and checking the news to see if anyone has gone missing in the last few weeks. At number 3, we have Misery. This is a book that will make anyone second guess getting famous. The book follows an author who gets into a brutal car accident and then wakes up in a woman's home. She is a huge fan and is nursing him back to health. Well, that's what it seems like until he learns that she is keeping him their prisoner. He tries to escape, he tries to drug her, but continuously fails, and then when she realizes that he's trying to leave her, she cuts off his feet so he can't leave. Then he has to beat her to death with a typewriter so he can make it out a footless man. All because she was absolutely obsessed with him. Talk about abandonment issues.
Starting off at number 10, we have The Stand by Stephen King. This book is probably one of those books you should put off reading until after the pandemic is over, whenever that is. We all know Stephen King is quite literally the king of horror, but this novel will hit home way too hard and fill you with ideas of what could have been. The Stand is about an apocalyptic world that fell to a deadly flu-like virus intended to be used as a biological weapon. Already this sounds familiar, but it gets worse. In this book, King introduces one of his most famous villains, Randall Hall. Once the outbreak takes hold, people start having visions of a benevolent woman and a terrifying dark man who is, of course, plotting to destroy the world. I'll stop now before I add any spoilers. Bear in mind, this book is a commitment. There are two versions, the 400-page one Stephen's publisher forced him to publish, or the 1200-page unabridged version. Either way, get comfy and leave the light on, because once you start, you won't be able to put this book down. Also, they made a TV show about it, so check that out too. But after you read the book.
In our number 9 spot today, we have The Collector. The Collector is a book that was written in 1963 by John Fowles and is a pretty wild thriller. This book is written from two separate perspectives and is about an absolute psycho who kidnaps a young woman who is an art student. He keeps her locked up in the cellar of his farmhouse, and part of the novel is from the point of view of the captor, and the other half is told from the perspective of the woman he has kidnapped. The beginning of the novel is from his point of view, and it details his obsession with the woman and why he has formed this horrible plan. The part from her point of view is detailed through diary entries that she's made rather than regular narration. The whole book is an absolute roller coaster and is extremely interesting. Of course, both characters have quite a few developments over the course of the story, and sometimes things can get extremely dark, but the ending is one that none of us really ever saw coming.
Coming in at number 8, we have The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Dude, I'm not claustrophobic, and obviously there are tons of Edgar Allan Poe short stories, books we could have used, but damn. We couldn't make this list without featuring him at at least once, and this story felt right. Warning, some spoilers ahead, but also, this was written in like 1846, you've had time. The Cask of Amontillado is a story of revenge. Montresor was deeply insulted by his rival, Fortunato, and uses his fondness for sherry to exact his revenge. But the way he does it, and the way the story builds around it is so skillful. It's so horrible you want to look away, but you can't. Montresor planned everything to a T, even making Fortunato bait himself into his own trap. Fortunato ends up watching Montresor build a wall of thick stone, trapping him inside a deep cellar forever. I think that's what gets me about this story, is that he's watching his own demise and he can't do anything about it. It terrifies me. Oh man, so maybe I am claustrophobic. Maybe. So anyway, check that one out.
In our number 7 spot today, we have Tender is the Flesh. Tender is the Flesh is a dystopian novel that was originally written in Spanish by Agustina Bazterrica. This novel is based in a world where a terrible virus has wiped out all animals except for humans. Instead of living a vegan lifestyle, humans have adapted in a way where cannibalism is now legal. This novel describes the process of breeding and slaughtering humans just for the means of consumption. Humans who are bred for food have their vocal cords removed in order to make them easier to control, and because of the fact that meat meant for human consumption should certainly not be able to speak. The main character of this story is a man named Marcos, and he is a human meat supplier who is a little unsure about these new societal rules, but we also delve into his personal life and the things he has gone through previous to this point. Marcos is divorced, and everything changes when he is given one of the female humans who is meant to help with the production of the human meat. This story is absolutely insane, and while the entire premise is quite dark, the twist this book has is truly unbelievable.
So coming in at number 6, we have 1984 by George Orwell. I mean, duh, we're putting this book on here, of course. It's terrifying. This is the most terrifying love story you will ever read, and you should. This book perfectly illustrates the bone-chilling possibilities that could happen if a government decided to take totalitarianism as far as it could go. It's been banned in the past for its social, sexual, political content, which is hilariously ironic because the whole book is about what happens if censorship goes too far. From the horrors of erasing human beings through unpersoning, persecuting people for thought crimes, the creation of newspeak for abolishing love, all the way to the most gruesome kinds of torture, like, think Game of Thrones. There are images I cannot erase from my mind. I remember knowing that Orwell wrote this as a commentary on Stalinism, but I didn't expect the love story. The two main characters endeavor to commit a small rebellion, which is to simply fall in love, because that's the only thing that they can do to fight this massive establishment. The way Orwell finds ways of igniting the humanity in his readers in order to highlight the terror of the circumstances they're in, it's haunting. The scary element of this book isn't a killer clown or a monster with 18 eyes. Instead, it's absolute power. This book outlines the terror of power in a world that's gone too far, and you won't be the same after you read it.
In our number 5 spot today, we have A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing is a stream of consciousness novel that was written by Emer McBride. This novel tells the story of a girl growing up in a traditional Irish family and all the struggles that she faces. At a first glance, this might not seem like a horrible thing that should be feared, but this novel goes deep. The writing style is absolutely fantastic and really highlights exactly what this character is going through. We never get a chance to know the name of the girl, but we get to know so much about her long-winded Catholic mother who is cruel, her disabled brother, and her very creepy uncle. Without giving much away, this really does set the scene for what's to come. This book can be hard to read because of the content, but it can also be hard to read because of the writing style. But as you go through, you understand why it is written this way, and it is genius. This book is intense, and while it took Emer 9 years too long to publish it, that really is a testament to how perfect it is.
Coming in at number 4, we have The Invasion of the Body Snatchers by Jack Finney. I can't. This book, I don't want to sleep for weeks. Imagine an alien invasion happens and you can't even see it. Before you know it, everyone you know and love is acting strangely. Soon bodies start piling up, all while more and more people become something you can't explain. Written in 1955 Invasion of the Body Snatchers by Jack Finney is so terrifying, it has sparked 4 movies and paranoid horror literature. The story recounts the horrific experience of a silent invasion where alien beings disguised as plants steal the bodies of living humans while they sleep. The most terrifying part for me was the struggle for the characters to try and stay awake, because if they didn't, the creatures would be right behind them in like what seemed like seconds. Even thinking about it right now makes my heart race. Have you ever tried not falling asleep in math class or an exam? Yeah, imagine that, but your life depends on it. Terrifying. This is the kind of horror book that will make you want to drink like 28 Red Bulls so you never sleep again.
In our number 3 spot today, we have Exquisite Corpse. Exquisite Corpse is a horror novel that was written by Poppy Z. Bright and was published in 1996. The publication for this book was quite a process for Poppy. In 1991, she had a deal with a publishing company to write 3 books. Exquisite Corpse was the final of the 3, and this company refused to publish it due to its violent content. After sending it to multiple other publishing companies, the overwhelming consensus was that the writing was fantastic, but the content was being described as too nihilistic, too extreme, and a bloodbath without justification. Of course, however, the novel did eventually end up being published, and a lot of people now understand the reviews the publishing companies were giving it. While a fantastically written book, this story follows Andrew Compton, who is a convicted serial killer and cannibal who ends up getting a second chance at living life beyond the cell. This story is very raw and absolutely horrifying. The parts of the story I haven't told you are certainly not for the faint of heart.
Coming in at number 2, we have The Troop by Nick Cutter. This next one is Lucy McPhee, Queen of Dark approved. She loves a good scary book, does our Lucy. The Troop is basically Lord of the Flies meets Alien, kind of. I asked her why she thought this book was so scary, and she said, it's scary because the kids have to become adults real damn fast and no one is there to help them. Also touches on how differently people react in unprecedented circumstances. Some lose their grip on reality. I love that word unprecedented. I've heard it way too many times this year. Essentially, Dr. Tim Riggs takes a group of boys out on a camping trip in Canada when out of nowhere, the troop has to battle a vicious infestation of contagious intestinal worms who starve their hosts. Some go mad and lose their grip on reality. I'll stop there so I don't, spoil everything, but considering this one is Queen of Dark approved, you know why it's on this list.
In our number 1 spot today, we have The Wasp Factory. The Wasp Factory is a novel that was published in 1984 and was written by Ian Banks. This is the first novel that was published from this writer, as the novels he had previously written had not been accepted, and this one was his attempt at writing a more mainstream novel. Well, it worked since it got published, but this novel is anything but mainstream. It follows a psychopathic teenager who is living on a secluded Scottish island. The teenager describes his childhood and the things that went on with some very gruesome details. We read not only about his past, but also the past of his family and how twisted it really is, which also gives us insight into just how wild this guy's mind really is. There are some pretty horrific depictions of violence in this book, which is what led to its mixed reviews. It certainly is a critically acclaimed novel, but it has also been called a work of unparalleled depravity, and that certainly speaks volumes about what exactly goes on. Alright guys, that has been our list, top 10 disturbing books that should be feared, part 2.
As always, like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what books you would have added to.
Starting us off with number 10 is The Incest Diary. I told you guys it can appear in any video, always be prepared for it. Published in 1999, the book goes into excruciating detail about a girl's incestuous relationship with her dad. The abuse began when she was 14 and lasted till her late 20s. Wow. The woman even tried going to the police to file charges against her dad, but the officer said it had been too long and that she should just write her story down. Justice, the police, it's nothing, he said. And so she did. She wrote a book. The book goes from flashbacks to her childhood to adulthood. It has her inner monologues that contradict themselves constantly. Her manic fixations are clear in the book, and she goes into detail about how it informed every single thing she ever did, how she sought the abuse and reenacted it it in other relationships, how if anything she started craving the abuse. The book sold more than 70,000 copies in France in the first 3 months after its release. I mean, it's dark, it's graphic, and it's anonymous. Coming in at number 9 is A Woman in Berlin. This one came out in English in 1954 and it's said to be memoirs of an anonymous German woman. It covers April to June 1945 when the Red Army occupied Berlin. The woman is a journalist and she goes on to describe really dark subject matter like getting gang raped by Russian soldiers and trying to survive in the situation by dating a Soviet officer and how other girls had to make similar decisions. Women literally had no protection from anyone at that time, so it really was eat or be eaten. When it was first published in Germany, it was met with a lot of disgust since it was just too soon to talk about the German suffering, but 2 years after Hitler died, the book was republished and was on the bestsellers list for more than 20 weeks. The author was actually revealed in 2003 posthumously by Jens Bisky, a literary editor. She identified the author to be Marta Hillers, and Marta's publisher was absolutely livid at the invasion of privacy that had caused. I don't get why people can't just let other people remain anonymous. Like, can everyone just live their lives and stop interfering in other people's lives? That'd be great. At number 8 we have Go Ask Alice. Now this book was published anonymously in 1971 and it revolves around the diary of a girl who gets addicted to drugs at 15 and then runs away from home. It's funny, when I saw this book in a bookshop a few years ago I really wanted to read it, but I had way too many unread books at the time on my shelf, so I didn't get it, but it's ironic, it's popped up into my life once again. But anyway, the book follows this girl as she goes through heartbreak, intense drug use, rape, body image, social acceptance, etc. It's sort of a coming of age story if anything, but laser focused on drugs. She basically moves city due to her dad's job and goes home one summer to stay with her grandparents. She attends a party, she tries a drink laced with LSD unknowingly, and so begins the journey of drugs. If you're interested in the title of the book, it's actually referencing a song called White Rabbit, which is alluding to Alice in Wonderland. Alice eats and drinks a bunch of things that change her size, so they're kind of linking that to a drug experience, but there is a twist and it's not the book's ending. Controversy sparked in the 70s because of Beatrice Sparks and people thinking she was the author of the book. She was initially credited as the editor, but then records showed she was the sole author, and then apparently it was the diary of a deceased teenager. I mean, it's really all over the place, but the book does look amazing but also scarily real. Filling our number 7 slot is Diary of an Oxygen Thief, and I've heard of this one too, and the title alone is just hilarious. Aren't we all just low-key oxygen thieves? Rudy. Either way, published in 2006, the book is a Dutch novel also written in the style of a memoir. That's 4 books in a row now that have been memoirs and anonymous. Honestly, people want to reveal their dirty secrets but not want to reveal themselves. It is what it is, guys. Either way, the book is about an Irish man who is an alcoholic and who takes pleasure in emotionally abusing women. What a catch. The man regrets his past relationships as the book goes on, and as he changes jobs, he moves to the US where culture shock happens, addiction and paranoia happens, love happens, everything just goes down, and the book isn't even that long. Self-deprecating humor is the book's forte. I mean, oxygen thief, the narrator doesn't even think he's worth the air he breathes, so I mean, is he or isn't he? Guess we'll have to read it to find out. Now at number 6 is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and the plot of this low-key sounds really good, like it could be the next historical film starring Saoirse Ronan for sure. Published sometime in the 14th century, the novel, if you couldn't tell from the Arthurian title, is a Middle English chivalric romance. The plot is actually lit, you guys. It follows Sir Gawain, one of King Arthur's knights, who basically agrees to a challenge from a mysterious Green Knight. The challenge is for any knight to cut the Green Knight with his axe, and he then gets to axe the knight back 1 year and 1 day later. Sir Gawain beheads the dude and he picks up his head and then reminds him he'll be back on the scheduled date. And so starts the story of Gawain trying to stay loyal and chivalrous and courageous about the agreement and the trials and tribulations along with that. Basically, hero goes on quest and gets tested. End plot. That's like Dungeons and Dragons right there. The book itself is written in stanzas and each one ends in a rhyme, so I know it may be a bit hard to read, but for those who are willing, do you. Coming in at number 5 is Might is Right. And this one is definitely gonna anger all our feminists out there, so here's to hoping this seems problematic to everyone watching, hopefully, fingers crossed. Published in 1890, this non-fiction book is a lot to take in. It focuses mostly on social Darwinism, which applies natural selection and the whole survival of the fittest science to human society and politics. He emphasizes how humans are motivated by our own selfish wants, and we base our decisions on the consequences of them rather than if they're morally right or not. He claims only physical strength can lead to moral right and actively bashes democracy and Christianity. He says BS like weakness should be viewed with hatred and that women and families are the property of men since they are more superior. It was even dubbed as proto-fascist white power manifesto, which I'm inclined to agree with. The author went by the pseudonym Ragnar Redbeard, so that's clearly not a real name, but interestingly enough, a white supremacist publisher and the Church of Satan founder both think Jack London wrote the book, and if he didn't, that's a really brutal accusation by some pretty questionable people. At number 4 is the autobiography of an ex-colored man. What a title. The title itself literally had me. I was like, ex-colored man, what does that even mean? Order on Amazon right now. But anyway, published in 1912, the book is a fictional account of a biracial man whose name we never find out since he's always just called the ex-colored man. The story follows his life living in America at the end of the 19th century when things like lynchings were very much still happening. His dream is to glorify black people through ragtime music, but after seeing the way society worked, he started passing as white to make his life easier and safer. He forms a friendship with a character called the rich white gentleman, and despite being a free man, there were aspects of slave-master dynamics within this relationship. It was originally published anonymously since the author was a diplomat and wasn't sure how controversial the book would be since issues of race and discrimination weren't really discussed in books back then. When it was republished 15 years later and it did moderately well, the author decided to be credited, and so the book's anonymity died in 1927. James Weldon Johnson is the man of the hour, and if you don't know what that means, that just means he's the author. Filling our number 3 slot is Lazarillo de Tormes. Now this one is actually a Spanish novella that was first published in 1554, probably the oldest book on this list, no doubt. The author chose to remain anonymous because of all the anti-clerical content, and the author was living in Spain. I'm sure he had beef with religious authority interfering in political matters and wanted to publicize it but also not get hung for it, so fair enough. The book followed an impoverished boy called Lazaro who goes from master to master. He gets more cunning and smart as he changes masters while simultaneously trying to take over his father's practice. The reason this book is so high up on the list is because it's sort of iconic in many ways. It was credited with inventing the picaresque genre, which basically means the adventures of a slightly rogue hero of lower class who uses his wits to survive in a corrupt society. Unsurprisingly enough, the book got banned by the Spanish crown for dissing the Catholic Church and all aristocracy, and only got unbanned in the 19th century. Now at number 2 is Frankenstein. I know, Mary Shelley, we know she wrote it, don't come for me. She started writing it at 18 and published it at 20. Can you imagine publishing one of the most renowned pieces of Gothic fiction at the age of 20? What were we doing at 20? Freaking twiddling our thumbs and playing Temple Run on our iPads probably. Oh, that's what I was doing at 20. Actually, no it wasn't. Cut that out, editor. When it was originally published in 1818, it was done so anonymously for many reasons probably. I mean, she was 20 for one, who's gonna take a 20-year-old seriously? Her dad was a very famous author, so maybe it was also the pressure of living up to that she didn't want, or maybe if it didn't do well, she just didn't want anything to do with it. Many actually thought her husband Percy wrote it since he's the one who wrote the introduction for it. When its second edition was published in 1823, that's actually when she appeared as the author. The novel was met with great success, which let the family move to Italy and get lit, really. Actually, no, it wasn't lit, her life was very tragic, but yeah, here's to Mary Shelley. And finally, at number 1 is novel with cocaine or cocaine romance. This one weirdly caught my attention because it's so vague. I was trying to gather as much info about it as I could, but it was actually quite hard. Published in 1934, it's a Russian psychological novel which explores ideology, and I mean it was Russian, communism ideology was important at the time. It explores philosophy and psychology all through the veil of a teen's cocaine addiction. We follow Vadim through school, his experiences with women, prison, what his life is like, what he thinks of everything pre-cocaine, and then obviously after. When it was published, the author was M. Agiev, and that's meant to be the pseudonym for Russian author Mark Levi, but this has never been confirmed, and so it still remains anonymous to this day.
Next up, in our number 9 spot, we have the Urantia book. This book is so mysterious that no one actually knows who wrote it. The book was said to have been written between the period of 1924 to 1955, and it was found in Chicago. The book talks about the meaning of life, God, Jesus, philosophy, and science. It apparently tells the story of Jesus as if he were a regular man, not the miracle worker he was portrayed as in the Bible. Urantia is Earth. The book came into the public's awareness because of doctors William and Lena Sadler, who have said to have been given the book by their neighbor. Their neighbor claimed that her husband was channeling some other worldly being. He started to write the messages down that he channeled, and it eventually became this book. The identity of the man was never revealed, as it was said that the authors being channeled never wanted any human name to be associated with the book. Interesting. Reminds me a little of Esther Hicks, who channels the entities who she calls Abraham, but unlike her books, this one seems quite dark and possibly cursed. In our number 8 spot, we have Les Prophéties. This is a very famous book that arguably is filled with ancient knowledge than curses, but there are supporters on both sides of these perspectives. Written by Michel de Nostradamus, the French alchemist, doctor, and claimed seer who could supposedly view future events before they happened. He wrote this book in the year 1555, predicting future events that have been said to have come true and events of the time while he was still alive. This is a highly acclaimed book that in recent times has become way more popular because of certain predictions coming true. He apparently predicted the assassination of the American president John F. Kennedy, the French Revolution, and some speculate that he predicted Hitler. A very famous part of the book depicts a young child growing up in the west of Europe from a poor family. His tongue will seduce a great troop and his fame will increase towards the realm of the east. Hitler was actually very popular in a city in Germany that was in the northeast, Berlin. He also managed to persuade many to join his cause and grew up from a poor family in the west of Europe. Seems like a perfect fit, if you ask me. I have actually been fascinated by this book for many years, and I wonder what prediction may come true next. Coming up at our number 7 spot, we have the Popol Vuh. This is a text written in the mid-1500s, and its name directly translates to the Book of the People. It discusses the Mayan language of Kaish, and it talks about the creation of mankind and animals. The book talks about how apparently before the creators of the world formed the earth, there was only sky and sea. Makes sense. Then they created animals, then mud men, then wooden men, and then 4 men out of corn. Sounds like the author was on some kind of illicit substance. Apparently women were made while the men were sleeping. Sounds like quite the weird tale that I could probably stand by saying that it's most likely cursed. The author sure seems like he was under some kind of spell to think up the idea of men being made of corn. Just ew. In our number 6 spot, we have The Cavern of Death. This is a very mysterious book, as it is actually one that was published anonymously. It is seemingly a fictional horror novel, but people believe it to possibly hold some weird dark magic within its pages, but that could also be because it was written around the time of 1794 and people were more religious back then. The story is about Sir Albert, who survives a journey through the Black Forest only to find out that the love of his life is engaged to a wealthy old baron. In a quest to save his love, Sir Albert finds himself in the Cavern of Death, which is full of horrors, skeletons, and ghosts. Could the reason behind the anonymity be because it is really a tale of a true story? I guess we may never know. In our number 5 spot, we have the Codex Seraphinianus. The Codex Seraphinianus is a book written in a language that is not real. Yes, you heard me correctly. This book is written in a language that is not a real language. It's either a masterpiece of art or the devil's book, I'm undecided. Apparently the book is about a world that does not exist. It was made in the late 70s and was published in 1981. The book is over 300 pages long in a language that doesn't exist. And it is full of illustrations of plants, animals, food, games, buildings, maps, and much more. It is one thing to write a book in a fake language that is 50 pages. Okay, sure, that sounds like a fun art project. Maybe fun isn't the right word, but that sounds like a challenging art project. Let's give it that. But to write a book that's 300 pages in a language that you've made up, that to me screams that this author maybe knows real live fairies or is friends with some kind of alien species, because how in the world do you commit to writing that many pages in a fake language? In any case, no one has ever cracked the code and figured out what the heck the book is about. That leads me to think that it's either something wondrous like the language of real live fairies or something demonesque. Regardless, I'm concluding that it's most likely cursed. In our number 4 spot, we have The Book of Lies and The Book of the Law by Aleister Crowley. I honestly couldn't decide which book to choose for this spot, and since they are both from the same author, I decided to group them together. The reason being is because the author is quite dark, and anything produced by him is most likely a product of his energy. But that might be controversial to say, as a lot of people from the occult community praise him and think he did a lot of great in the world. But others disagree. This is a man that was a self-proclaimed occultist and magician who was alive during the period of 1875 to 1947 and lived in England. He had a large following of people who wanted to learn magic, and he was known for channeling spirits and doing group magical naked rituals. If you catch my drift. Please catch my drift. He was actually kicked out of Italy in 1923 after word got around about his gatherings. Understandable. He understood himself to be a prophet, with the task to help bring humanity into the next era. Sounds like a true narcissist to me. In any case, his books completely creep me out, and so I had to add them to the list. In our number 2 spot, we have Necronomicon. Okay, this book gives me the creeps straight away. It's so dark visually, and right away you just know that it isn't a book about how to make your dreams come true. It's more about how to destroy others' dreams. Okay, I'm joking, but honestly, I think it's possibly worse than that. Known for being one of the most haunted books of all time, you just know that this book is cursed. Arguably, if anyone were ever given this book, then they might have someone wanting to curse them because its low vibes are just screaming off of its pages, and who would want that for anyone? Apparently, inside its pages are instructions to contact your deceased loved ones, and there are pretty frightening pictures on its pages. The original copy of the book is actually kept inside a locker within Massachusetts Miskatonic University. If that's not telling you everything, then I don't know what to tell you.
Number 6. Untitled. The best tracks on rap albums are always the ones that are titled Untitled. You know what I mean? Kendrick's entire album, I'm like, you get the idea. The Untitled Grimoires are a set of handwritten spell books that were sold online for $14,000. This was back in 2013. Also, pretty good price, may I add, for what's about to come. The books were written a long time ago by a high priestess, the leader of a coven, and they included spells, incantations, enchantments, and instructions on summoning spirits and demons. All the good stuff. 30 pages or less, here we go. The seller of the books warned that any non-believer who messes with the book will bring upon themselves a deadly curse. And on the first page of the book, the priestess herself wrote that proceeding with the book may have serious consequences. It literally says, quote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." Yeah, the craft. We love that. So if you love buying old books for thousands of dollars, maybe avoid the Untitled Grimoires. Yeah, go with something a bit more, you know, titled. A more jazzy grimoire. I don't know. I'm gonna go get a grimoire after work. I'm gonna go try one out. A nice 700-pound book made of dust. Number 5, The Book of Black Magic and Pacts. This one has an author that isn't a demon, which is nice. How fun is that? Off to a better start. The Book of Black Magic and Pacts was written by A.E. Waite. It covers lore, magic, cult history, and ceremonies. This book has been referred to as one of the greatest overviews of occultism, and it includes a large number of magical spells from a large number of sources. The book is also said to contain rituals of black magic. This is like Don't touch this kind of stuff, right? How many X-Men comics do we need? Stop reading these books. The author of this book, A.E. Waite, apparently he was a British poet as well. Nice, we love that. I love a good haiku, especially when it's about cults. Number 4, the Picatrix. This is a grimoire, of course, that is said to contain a large amount of magic that is presumed to be from the 11th century. We're not exactly sure. The pages contain some philosophy, astrology, and even some medieval science, which at first sounds cool, but these sciences are really just recipes for concoctions that involve mixing human and animal DNA. Like mixing urine and opium. You know, stuff like that where nobody should be really reading or trying any of it. The results were promised to be magical, but I'm far from convinced. This is really gross. This one definitely isn't the darkest or the spookiest on the list, which is a nice little refresher as we get to our grimoire ending here. And while some of the contents in this book is definitely historically interesting, I guess, I think it's probably best to just stay away from magic and spells in general. Number 3, Sorrows of Young Werther. We've got a lot of books on this list that are said to contain magic and spells and incantations. That's a fun word that I've said about 1100 times already. This one here is a little different from the others on this list because it doesn't have any of those spells in it. No, this is a book that came out in 1774 and it's said to have a large and negative impact on its readers since its release. So apparently after this book came out, a huge wave of its readers ended up taking their own lives because of the strange and dark contents that were in the book. Young men would start to emulate the main character of the book by dressing like him and then acting like him before ultimately following his dark actions in the book as well. This actually led to the book being banned in some countries, which here I can agree with. Yeah, something's clearly off here. It's believed that even people who were in a healthy place mentally prior to reading the book would still be tempted to follow that dark path after reading it. Hence, cursed, right? Yeah, grab Game of Thrones, skip Sorrow of Young Werther, please. Also reach out if you have any dark thoughts. That's much easier than renting a demonic codex. Number 2, The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. A little wordy for a title, in my opinion, but here we go. When you're an expert in magic, you probably don't give the same sort of gifts that the non-magical folks do, right? You're like, hey, here's a Rubik's Cube, I guess? So it's no surprise that Abramelin gifted his son a book of spells and curses, right? Just some Doctor Strange stuff right there. The classic Malfoy method, 5 points to Slytherin, there we go. They're learning young. In the early 1900s, this book was translated into English, and ever since then there have been rumors swirling that the book is cursed. I mean, its source material is literally curses, so yeah, that checks out. Rumor has it that the cursed nature of this book, in part, has to do with Abramelin's belief that everybody has their own personal demon. This book holds instructions on how to get your demons under control by, reaching out to the spirit world. Yeah, if you're trying to quit smoking, don't read Abramelin's magical book, stick to Nicorette. I think that's safer. I think it's safer. Unless you absolutely know what you're doing, the contents of this book might just be too powerful to handle, my friend. Those who have had bad experiences with the book explained either bad luck or hauntings soon followed. But they quit smoking, so hey, who knows?
In our number 8 spot today, we have the Picatrix. This is a grimoire that is said to contain a large amount of magic that is presumed to be from the 11th century. This text has long been considered pretty obscene because of the graphic content that exists within the book. The pages contain some scholarly work with philosophy, astrology, and even some medieval science, which is actually pretty cool. But then there are things like recipes for concoctions that involve mixing human and animal blood, brains, urine, and other bodily fluid in with opium or other kind of dangerous substances. While some of what this book contains is definitely historically interesting, I think it's probably best to stay away from the magic and spells that lurk within. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Grand Grimoire. This novel is an 11th century collection of poetry that was written by Omar Khayyam, but it's not what's inside of this book that holds the curse. In 1912, a bookbinder is said to have given this book lavish embellishments. There was silver, mahogany, ivory, leather, and over 1,050 jewels including ruby, garnet, topaz, turquoise, and gold. He took such care with this book that it actually took him 2 years to finish, and in 1912 is when he finished. Once finished, there was some trouble selling it. I mean, the book was extremely expensive now. The binder decided to ship it from the UK to the US for a chance to have an easier time selling it, but then there was a mix-up at customs and the book was shipped shipped back to London. From here it is said that the book finally sold, but it was only for half the original price. The bookbinder once again had to ship the book overseas, but this time, guess which ocean liner the book ended up on? The ill-fated Titanic, of course. It is said that this original copy was never retrieved from the wreckage, but when the book was recreated, more strange things began to happen surrounding it. During World War II, it was said to be placed in a vault in London, but it ended up being ruined in a blitz. The vault itself was fine, but somehow the book inside, aside from the jewels, was completely turned to ash. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Lesser Key of Solomon. This is a grimoire that is said to be cursed. It is said to contain spells that are used for summoning over 72 different demons, and just to add a little air of mystery, no one is exactly sure who wrote it. This is because the book is made up of a few different texts that have been compiled from somewhere around the 17th century. This book is said to be so cursed that even having a copy of it will cause the owner to either experience constant bad luck or have the worst luck of all with passing away. People have shared their terrifying stories with the book, and they include the book's pages turning on their own, and another person shared that the book violently threw itself across the room at them. How terrifying would that be? Well, we aren't sure who wrote it. There have been rumors or stories that suggest it might have been King Solomon. It is said that perhaps he wrote it for his son and then asked him to bury it with him in his grave. When being prepared for burial, a group of Babylonian philosophers found the book, and this is when they were visited by an angel who told them to hide the book from the unworthy. They then placed a spell on the book which was meant to keep it from getting into the wrong hands, and that is said to be how the book got its curse.
Right, this book seems to be a favourite amongst murderers at number 10. We have The Catcher in the Rye, which you shouldn't read unless you want to go mad. Oddly, The Catcher in the Rye seemed to inspire two very high-profile shootings, the murder of John Lennon and the attempted murder of Ronald Reagan. John Lennon was shot dead on the 8th of December 1980 by Mark David Chapman. The lone gunman from Texas was found to be obsessed with J.D. Salinger's novel and was found calmly reading it on a curb nearby his attack on Lennon prior to his arrest. It seems he wrote his statement inside the novel too. He felt like if he carried out the assassination, he would become Holden Caulfield, the protagonist of the novel. 5 months later, on March the 30th, 1981, John Hinckley carried out an assassination attempt on the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. It seems that Hinckley's motivation was a weird attempt to win over actress Jodie Foster, whom he had an obsession with. When Hinckley was caught, he was found with a copy of none other than The Catcher in the Rye. That's right, coming in at number 8, we have Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. When Bradbury's 1953 book about a dystopian future came out, the marketing team had a wise idea. The book is about a group of so-called firemen who burn down the homes and belongings of people who read illegal, non-state approved books. Wouldn't it be cool for the limited edition books to be fireproof? It sure would. The only issue was that people didn't know what was what in the 1950s, and the book was bound with asbestos. You know, the substance that gives you lung cancer. Not great. So while the book in itself is a bit of a scary read, the reality of the book is even scarier. Coming into number 3, we have The Great Omar. The Francis Sangorski special edition of The Great Omar is for sure cursed. Not only was the original one of the most blinging books around, it seemed to be on the receiving end of some seriously bad juju. Emblazoned with gold leaf, gemstones, and peacock feathers, the original copy of The Great Omar sank on board the Titanic and is lost somewhere in the North Atlantic Ocean. Sangorski then died just 6 weeks later as he drowned in an accident in the English Channel. A second copy was made by Stanley Bray, recreating the original. Now that copy was destroyed in the London Blitz. A third copy was then painstakingly recreated by Bray once again, who died just 5 years later. When asked about the book's tragic history, Bray said, "I'm not in the least bit superstitious, even though they do say that the peacock is a symbol of disaster. I'll say." And the only surviving copy now lays in the British Library. Visit if you dare. This isn't a book up next, but it is a poem which really is just kind of a short lyrical book. Now I'm not sure you're ready for this, but people who read this poem are doomed to die. In at number 2, we have Tamino's Hell. I know that all men must die and all of that, but Tamino's Hell is said to speed the process way up. The poem is a 1919 Japanese work of literature that is cursed, 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 and cursed again. It's supposed to cause death and tragedy if you read it aloud, so just don't do it. The poem tells the story of a young boy's damnation, his sickness as he vomits blood and travels to the blackest of hells. Lovely jubbly. It isn't just Japanese readers who need to be a bit worried. The poem has been translated into English. Now, reading the poem is fine, feel free, even though it is kind of gross. What you don't want to do though is read it aloud in any language, unless, well, just actually don't do it. Finally, at number 1, we have one of the most cursed and spooky books in the entire history of print. We have the Grand Grimoire. The Grand Grimoire is often referred to as the Gospel of Satan or the Red Dragon text, and it is a book of spells believed to possess insane powers, but beyond that, it's said to be one of the most intense and potent occult books in existence. Written in the 16th century, the incantation book tells the reader how to summon the dead, and also how to summon powerful demons. Deeper sections of the book allegedly tell the reader how to do a deal with the devil. The book was said to be written by a man who was possessed by Satan. Now, the original text is so dangerous that it is allegedly held in storage by the Vatican's secret archives. The book is so mysterious and famous that it is frequently referenced in pop culture. Coming in at number 10, we have Real Life Death Notes. Death Note is a Japanese manga series written by Toskimi Oba. I'm really sorry if I pronounced that wrong. The story is about a high school student who comes across a mysterious notebook, the Death Note. He soon finds out that he can use the notebook to kill people by simply writing their names down. This series was adapted into an American movie and it is now on Netflix. Anyway, a lot of teenagers in real life have been inspired by the manga series and the film, and they've started their own death notebooks. There have been countless incidents. For example, in Pingtung County in Taiwan, they saw a string of Death Note inspired issues. In 2015, a middle school student in Pennsylvania was suspended for making his own death notebook and writing the names of 15 students in it. Some people say that the story of Death Note stems back to some truth too, with legends circulating that in ancient Chinese civilizations, the Yellow Emperor had a notebook of death. I actually have to thank one of our subscribers for bringing this next book to my attention. I was reading the comments on the top 10 cursed books part 1, and one of our subscribers highlighted this to me, so thank you Kim Jana for the recommendation. Coming into number 9, we have the Book of the Son of Genus. This is a 13th century grimoire containing Arabic magic spells and provides guidance for the afterlife. The book is all about demons and jinns and evil beings, and despite being a highly influential text in the Arabic and Muslim worlds, it has long been banned in a lot of Islamic cultures for its subject matter. The book allows the reader to communicate with spirits, but that doesn't always mean good spirits. Coming into number 8, we have the Cursed Babylonian Tablets. Babylon was said to be an ancient city in what is present-day Iraq and Syria. The Babylonian era ran from 1895 BCE to around 7 BCE, so hundreds of years. Back in those days, books weren't really a thing. Instead, people read from inscriptions on tablets, so rocks or stone. These tablets were often known to carry a curse. A Babylonian king placed a curse on a set of clay tablets back in the 7th century BCE, having the text inscribed with, "Whosoever shall carry off this tablet, or shall inscribe his name on it side by side with mine own, may Asher and Belet overthrow him in wrath and anger, and may they destroy his name and the prosperity in the land." Bit dramatic. It turns out that actually these tablet curses were very common. Because reading material was hard to find, ancient people often tried safeguarding their property by claiming it was cursed. Basically, it was a ye olde way of making sure little twerps didn't steal your things. Coming into number 7, we have the Babadook book. There was a time when the book from the 2014 Australian horror movie The Babadook was fiction. The book in the movie is cursed and or haunted, as it is constantly delivered to Amelia and Oscar's home. In the movie, the book depicts the horrifying events that are about to befall the family in a creepy pop-up style. Now, movie lovers have gone one step further and demanded that the illustrator turn the fictional book into a reality. That's right, you can now buy the haunted book for yourself in real life. Following a successful crowdfunding campaign, Insight Editions was chosen to create a limited run of 6,000 books. I think it's a really cool idea, but I'm not sure if I'd want that in my home. If it's in a word or it's in a look, you can't get rid of the Babadook. duck, so get that book out my house, thanks. Coming in at number 6, we have A Portrait of Marriage by Curiosity Incorporated. I was trying to do some research into lesser known haunted books because I guess only the bigger stuff makes headlines, and I thought, you know what, there must be like, you know, your average bog standard ghost that is chosen to haunt your average bog standard book, and it turns out I was right. I found a video by small and up and coming YouTuber Curiosity Incorporated, and he's an antiques trader. He made a video called Saga of the Haunted Book, who knew books could be so creepy. In this video he talks about how he bought a bunch of old books off a dealer, and as she left, she basically just turned around and said to him, oh, by the way, one of these is haunted. I'm not sure how I would deal with that, like tell me it's haunted before I buy it. The book is called Portrait of a Marriage by Vita Sackville West and Harold Nicholson. It seems that the spirit had an attraction to the book. Now the antiques dealer said, I certainly wouldn't want to be the guy who got stuck haunting this book. So far though, he hasn't mentioned any further weird goings on. Forget about one spooky book, all of the books in this library are plagued by a pesky spirit. Coming into number 5, we have the Leeds Library Ghost. Leeds, Yorkshire, England, one of my favourite places. Yorkshire is steeped in ancient history, so you'll regularly hear ghost stories coming from this area of the United Kingdom. The Leeds Library dates back to 1768, so it's older than the USA. The ghost haunting the premises is said to be the first ever librarian of the building, Vincent Sternberg. In 1844, the new librarian, James McAllister, came face to face with the ghost of Sternberg as he worked late at night. Now the ghost is said to linger most frequently around the old books, and in 2012, researcher Jeremy Dyson spent 12 hours in the library documenting the hauntings. He uploaded a really interesting and revealing video to YouTube that actually captures some of the ghostly goings on in the building. Another investigator, Sean Reynolds, captured a ladder moving alongside a bookshelf at the library. Coming in at number 4, we have the Necronomicon pop-up nightmare book featuring Cthulhu. Anyone who loves the Evil Dead franchise will know about the fictional Book of the Dead. This Book of the Dead has actually long since been mentioned in literature, possibly first in the 1924 H.P. Lovecraft's The Hound. Either way, Proposition Press have taken it upon themselves to turn the Necronomicon into a truly terrifying pop-up book. The book has 5 pop-up scenes, including pull tabs, and they depict moments from the 5 original Evil Dead stories: the Dunwich Horror, the Shadow Out of Time, the Call of the Cthulhu, At the Mountain of Madness, and the Color Out of Space. Now they may not actually be cursed like the source material, but I have to say the images will haunt my nightmares forever. Muggles beware at number 3, this grimoire will get you. In 2013, 2 handwritten spiral-bound spellbooks or grimoires were sold for $13,865 in Toronto via abebooks.com. A grimoire is a witch's spellbook and is generally believed that actually the book has to be burned after the death of the witch or else the book becomes cursed. Now these grimoires appear to have been written in the 1960s by a high priestess of Wicca called Destra Irene. She was said to be an American witch with English and Swedish ancestry. Now it's not known what's happened to her, whether she's alive or dead, but the opening pages of both of the texts contained a warning that reads, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." So basically, no muggles allowed. Next up, this depressing book led to a spate of suicides. At number 2, we have The Sorrows of Young Werther. The Sorrows of Young Werther is a best-selling book written by a 25-year-old Wolfgang von Goethe. The book was published in Germany in 1774 and is a semi-autobiographical tale of a failed romance. It's told via letters from a man named Werther to his friend Wilhelm. When Werther finds out that his love has married another man, he borrows 2 pistols and shoots himself, although he botches it, and it takes him a grueling 12 hours to die. The book led to some of the first known examples of copycat suicides. The men would dress in the same clothing as described by Goethe and use a pistol to shoot themselves. Often the book was found at the scene of suicides. Now after the book's publication and the spate of copycat suicides, sociologists began to suspect that suicide may be culturally contagious. Finally, at number 1, this is one of the most interesting things I learned today. So next up, this one author cursed himself and everyone involved in his book's publication, and he's now the target of a serious Iranian murder plot. What am I talking about? Salman Rushdie and the Curse of the Satanic Verses. Salman Rushdie received a very intense response from the Muslim community for his fourth novel, The Satanic Verses. The book, in fact, garnered such an intense response that a fatwa was ordered. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's basically a death order, and the current monetary value of it is thought to be over $3 million. This was issued by Ayatollah Khomeini, the former supreme leader of Iran. Now, Rushdie became the target of the Muslim order, and it's still in place. It wasn't just him either. The Iranian government demanded the death of the author and all of those involved in its publication. While Rushdie wasn't hit, his Japanese translator was stabbed to death in 1991. The Italian translator was also stabbed in July 91, but he survived. The Norwegian publisher William Nygaard was shot 3 times in 1993, but survived. And it's thought that the fatwa was behind a deadly fire at a hotel in Turkey in which 35 people died. Salman Rushdie is still alive, but he is still under police protection. Some Muslims out there still want to kill him. It turns out that fatwas can only be retracted by the person that issued them, and Khomeini is dead.
Starting us off at number 10 is The Exorcist. I would be doing an injustice if I didn't start with one of the scariest movies of all time. And why was it the scariest movie of all time? Because it was one of the scariest books of all time. Written by William Peter Blatty and published in 1971, the book takes place in Washington, D.C. and follows demonically possessed 12-year-old Reagan McNeil, who is also the daughter of a very famous actress. The duo are in Georgetown whilst the mother is filming when Reagan becomes sick. Weird things start happening around the house, which her mother tries to find rational explanations for, and Reagan's condition intensifies and deteriorates. Nothing helps her until the mother gives in and turns to a priest for help. A pair of priests spend the whole book trying to exorcise the demon, and it was actually based off of a real case of possession William heard about in the 50s. I don't want to go into more detail and include spoilers because if you haven't read it, you definitely should. I feel like scary books scare you in a way that movies just can't. When I used to read them at home alone, I physically could not continue reading because I was scared. I was scared of reading. Like, that is a real fear, people. Coming in at number 9 is Blindness. Written by Jose Saramago and published in 1995, the book follows an unnamed city or country that's been afflicted with an unexplainable epidemic of blindness. And since most people there go blind, a social and economic breakdown soon follows. The plot involves a group of unnamed characters, and the book is written in really long sentences, and there are no speech marks around the dialogue, so you're also like, wait, who's speaking right now? The first half of the book takes place in a dirty, overcrowded asylum where the group and countless other blind people have been quarantined, and the whole thing descends into anarchy basically. People are worried about the availability of food, necessities, no medicines are allowed inside, so even a small infection could end up deadly. Gangs start forming, they start raping women in exchange for giving them food. It just gets really bad. The only person in the land that doesn't get infected was the doctor's wife, and we follow how she has to try and help the group survive. At number 8 we have The Haunting of Hill House. It's not a horror if a haunted house isn't on this list, am I right? Written by Shirley Jackson and published in 1959, the book has been dubbed one of the best literary ghost stories in the 20th century. It went on to become 2 films, a play, and the basis of a Netflix series, so it's safe to say even in the 21st century we are getting a lot of inspiration from it. Shirley even drew the floor plans of the house and its outside before beginning the novel. The plot takes place in a mansion called Hill House and follows 4 main characters. An investigator of the supernatural, Eleanor, a shy girl, and a disabled mother, Theodora, and the mansion's heir, Luke. They all come to the house because of having experienced something paranormal or wanting to investigate the paranormal. The house itself has been the site of many deaths and suicides, and as their stay progresses, creepy things start happening, as they always do. The house itself seems sentient and angry, but the best part of the book is the narrator. We trust Eleanor from the start because she seems quite reliable and sweet, but as the book progresses she becomes more and more unreliable, she starts descending into madness, and then it gets confusing on whether the things happening in the house are really happening, or she's just seeing things or hallucinating them. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Filling our number 7 slot is The Silence of the Lambs. I don't know how I could have made this list and not included Hannibal Lecter. Written by Thomas Harris and published in 1988, the book is actually a sequel about the forensic psychiatrist and cannibalistic serial killer Dr. Hannibal Lecter. First of all, has anyone anyone seen the show Hannibal? I watched the first season. I could literally only watch one episode a day, not even binge it, because it was just too taxing watching such screwed up things happen for so long. Like, I used to have to mentally prepare before watching it. But anyway, at this point Hannibal is already in jail, so the plot follows an FBI trainee called Clarice who is given the task of drawing up psychological profiles of serial killers, starting with Hannibal. Well, that's what she's told, but her real mission that she doesn't know about is to try and get Hannibal's help identifying a new serial killer on the loose dubbed Buffalo Bill. The plot follows her periodically visiting Hannibal and probing him about the killer. He gives her cryptic clues in exchange for knowing about her disturbing childhood as an orphan. This book won 2 awards for Best Novel and it's a literary gem. I haven't met anyone who hasn't heard of The Silence of the Lambs. Like, they won't even know what it is, but they would have heard of it for sure. Now at number 6 is Carrion Comfort. Written by Dan Simmons and published in 1989, it won the Locust Poll Award for Best Horror Novel, the Bram Stoker Award, and the August Derleth Award for Best Novel. Stephen King even calls it one of the greatest horror novels of the 20th century, so based on that, I reckon it's a pretty good book. The book focuses on a fraction of humanity who has intense psychic powers called the Ability. These people can control someone from a distance, and I mean control them, like physically too, as in they could make someone commit murder if they really wanted to. Killing someone indirectly gives the Ability users energy and youth, so they're almost like pseudo-vampires. The book sets up the fact the abilities have been used throughout time, whether that's fake charisma of a world leader, everyday murders, or the Holocaust. Although it's split into many timelines, it mostly follows a group of immoral people in the 80s, some of which want to take over the world. Investigators pursue a series of murders and realize these people really need to be stopped. It's honestly brutal. They get together in one scene and talk about all the people they killed, including John Lennon, and then later on 2 of them end up fighting but use normal humans around them as soldiers to fight each other. It's screwed up, but isn't every book on this list? Coming in at number 5 is A Head Full of Ghosts. Written by Paul G. Tremblay and published in 2015, the book follows an American family that's troubled. The dad is unemployed, they barely have any money, and then things get even worse due to the mental illness of their 14-year-old daughter, Marjorie. The book is told from the perspective of Marjorie's 8-year-old sister, Mary, and it starts when Marjorie starts telling Mary macabre stories instead of innocent Dr. Seuss ones. Welcome to the real world, Mary. Anyway, the dad, who is a born-again Catholic, decides Marjorie doesn't have a mental illness, she's demonically possessed, 2 very different things, and so he gets the help of his priest to try and exorcise her. And let's just say Marjorie is not really telling the truth. I'll leave it at that. At number 4 is Let the Right One In. Written by John Lindqvist and published in English in 2008, the book is essentially a vampire story, but it's not like Twilight, before you guys just skip number 4. And for the record, I just like to say I read all the Twilight books and the books were actually really good. Please do not base the series on Kristen Stewart's acting, thank you. But anyway, the plot follows a 12-year-old boy called Oscar, a vampire child called Eli, and its caretaker Hakan. The story takes place in Stockholm in the 80s and focuses on a plethora of disturbing things like pedophilia, self-mutilation, murder, bullying, genital mutilation, etc. Oscar becomes friends with Eli when it moves in next door, and he finds out Eli was turned into a vampire when they were a child and hence forever remains in a young body and mind. Hakan, Eli's caretaker, was a former teacher who got caught with child pornography, and as you can imagine, he's very much in love with Eli and goes out and kills people and gets blood for them in order to sustain them in exchange for money. Even though Hakan would do it for free if Eli would let them be physically intimate, but we all know that's not gonna happen. The story goes on when Hakan gets caught on his last blood-procuring mission, and things just get worse and worse from there. Death, murder, acid throwing, blood drinking, the book has it all, and it was adapted into 2 feature films. And finally, at number 1 is Rosemary's Baby. Written by Era Levin and published in 1967, the book sold over 4 million copies, and that made it the best-selling horror novel of the 60s. The plot follows Rosemary Woodhouse and her struggling actor husband Guy, who recently moved into an old Gothic apartment building. Despite being warned about the building's strange history involving murder and witchcraft, they move in anyway. And the couple are quickly welcomed by neighbors Minnie and Roman, who Rosemary gets a weird vibe from. Due to some freak accident blinding his theatrical rival, Guy gets a great role and agrees to try for their first kid. Hurrah! but not. But that night, Rosemary has a sexual dream involving an inhuman creature, and the next day she has claw scratches all over her boobs, on her crotch, basically everywhere. And then somehow she becomes pregnant, but then falls severely ill, losing more and more weight and craving raw meat. Everything goes tits up, and I can 100% say Guy is not the father.